Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. My name is Lila. I'm 32, and right now, I'm standing in the middle of my living room with a secret that's been eating away at me for months. Maybe years. It's one of those things you think you'll never admit out loud, because admitting it means admitting you crossed a line, that you lost your way. That you're not who you thought you were. I crossed a line with my girlfriend's mom. And it wasn't some wild mistake or drunken accident. It was slow. Quiet. Unraveling. There was a time, not too long ago, when my relationship with Maya, the woman I've loved for 7 years, felt like something I could sink into completely. Safe. Exciting in the way that only long-term love can be, the kind that grows beyond lust and settles into something deeper, something warm. There were touches that made my skin tingle, not just out of habit but because they meant something. A kiss that lingered just right, a hand that found mine like a promise, a laugh shared late at night that made the whole world shrink to just us. But those moments started to feel fewer. Like the flame between us wasn't quite snuffed out, but it was suffocating under a pile of silence and routine. The small things began to unravel the closeness we once had. I'd reach for her, and she'd stiffen, like I was asking for something she didn't want to give. The way she hugged me changed. What used to be a soft, warm embrace sometimes felt more like a demand, like she needed to hold me for herself but wasn't really present. There was this one night, not too long ago, that I keep going back to in my head. We were on the couch, the way we often were after work, tired, a little worn down from the day. I reached out for a kiss, something simple and gentle. But when our lips met, I felt a strange disconnect. It wasn't cold exactly. It was like trying to catch a shadow. Her mouth was there, but the spark was gone. I pulled back slightly, confusion blooming in my chest. She gave me a half smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. And then she turned away. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just stress or exhaustion. But nights like that multiplied. The space between us started to feel like a wall I couldn't climb over. More than once, I caught myself hesitating before touching her. Because touching her meant risking rejection. And rejection in a place where I thought I was safest felt like losing a piece of myself. So I started to withdraw. Quietly. Emotionally. I told myself I was protecting my heart, but maybe I was just building a prison. And then, the moment came. The moment I realized something had changed, something I couldn't ignore any longer. It was the night Maya left for a work trip. I kissed her goodbye at the airport, and the way she held me felt different. Distant. Like she was already halfway gone, not just physically but in a way I couldn't reach. I watched her walk away, the space between us stretched wider than any goodbye could explain. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I found myself wandering to her mother's house, the one place I never thought I'd go for comfort. And that's when everything started to shift. But that part of the story, it's something I'm still unraveling. After that night at the airport, the silence between Maya and me stretched like a canyon I didn't know how to cross. I knew something was wrong, but every time I tried to talk about it, the words tangled inside me, too fragile and complicated to untangle in conversation. Maya's mother, Elaine, was a woman of quiet strength, an art gallery curator who lived 2 blocks away from us. She wasn't the kind of woman you expected to see in a story like this, but that's what makes it all so complicated. Elaine was gentle, thoughtful, but also guarded in her own way. Maybe that's why, when I felt invisible at home, I found myself drawn to her presence. Maya is an ER nurse, someone who thrives on action and control, but struggles with vulnerability. At work, she's fierce and unshakable, but at home, that armor sometimes becomes a wall. She shows love with her hands, touches, hugs, restless kisses, but it's all physical, like she's trying to prove something to herself or to me without ever actually saying the words. I've always been someone who craves connection first, the kind that starts in the heart before it reaches the skin. One evening, a few days after Maya's trip began, I sat on our couch, the quiet hum of the city outside bleeding through the windows. My phone buzzed. Elaine. She wanted to meet for coffee. I wasn't sure why, but I said yes. At the cafe, Elaine was warm and calm, a sharp contrast to the tension twisting inside me. She listened without judgment as I spilled pieces of my frustration. How Maya's touches felt like demands I wasn't ready to meet. How the silence between us screamed louder than any argument ever could. How I felt like I was disappearing inside my own relationship. Elaine reached out and took my hand in hers, soft, reassuring. It wasn't anything romantic, but it was a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. I think Maya loves you, Elaine said quietly. But sometimes love isn't enough when it's not felt. Her words echoed in my mind over the next days. When Maya came home, exhausted from 12-hour shifts, she would try to kiss me or pull me close, but I'd flinch or pull away. Not because I didn't love her, but because I felt like she was trying to fix something I wasn't ready to fix with just skin. One night, she caught me staring out the window, lost in my own storm. "Lila, please," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm trying." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a breath. "But I need more than trying. I need you to see me." She reached for me then, hands trembling. She pulled me into a hug that was both desperate and fragile, like she was trying to hold on to a version of us that was slipping away. I wanted to melt into her arms, but the wall inside me was still there, cold and high. "I don't know how," she said, her lips near my ear. "I'm scared." I stayed silent, tears pricking behind my eyes. Because I was scared too. Not just of losing her, but of losing myself in the process. The days blurred, filled with these half-spoken emotions and touches that both comforted and confused me. Maya's love was real, but I was starving for the emotional intimacy that seemed just out of reach. And that's when Elaine's presence started to feel like a quiet anchor in my storm, a place where I could breathe, where the invisible weight didn't press so hard against my chest. But I wasn't ready to admit that yet. Not even to myself. The night was thick with that familiar tension, the kind that makes every breath feel heavier than the last. Maya was sitting beside me on the couch, her hand lightly brushing against mine like she was testing the water. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance between us, but my skin felt numb, my heart tangled in knots I couldn't unravel. "Hey," she whispered, her voice soft but hesitant. "You okay?" I nodded, though it wasn't true. I was anything but okay. My mind spun with thoughts I couldn't say aloud. I saw the way she looked at me, hopeful, but unsure. Like she was waiting for me to be someone I no longer felt like being. She reached for my face, her thumb tracing the curve of my cheek. I flinched, pulling away just a little, not enough to hurt her but enough to make the distance feel wide and cold. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, afraid of what she might think. "No, don't be," Maya said, her fingers lingering near my neck. I miss you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I could want her the way I used to. But when her hand moved lower, brushing my waist and then sliding around to a playful slap on my hip, I stiffened inside. That slap, something I used to find cheeky and endearing, felt like a stranger's touch. It wasn't warm, it wasn't inviting. It was like a reminder of everything I wasn't feeling anymore. "Lila?" Maya's voice was softer now, filled with concern. I swallowed hard, biting back the words that threatened to spill. Because what I really wanted to say was complicated and messy. "I don't know if I can do this right now." She pulled me close, and I let her, just for a moment, because I wanted to want it, wanted to feel that old spark. But when her lips found mine, the kiss was hollow. I could taste the effort, the longing, but it didn't reach me. It didn't set anything on fire. Instead, I felt empty, like a ghost trapped in someone else's skin. I pulled away first, the room suddenly too small, too suffocating. Maya looked at me with a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why won't you just let me in?" I wanted to explain, but the words tangled in my throat. How do you tell someone you're drowning in your own mind? That every touch feels like a question you don't know how to answer? Instead, I just shook my head. "I'm tired." She sighed and rested her forehead against mine. "We'll get through this." We always do. But I wasn't sure anymore. Later, lying in the dark, I kept replaying the night in my mind. Her hands, her kisses, they should have comforted me. But they didn't. They felt like pressure, like every loving gesture was edging closer to something I wasn't ready for. Why does everything have to turn into sex? That question haunted me, twisting inside like a blade. I wanted intimacy, real closeness. But it felt like the only way Maya knew how to show love was physical, touch that begged for something more. And I wasn't sure if I could give it back, not yet. Maybe not ever. And so, I pulled further away, afraid of losing myself in the process of holding on. The night had started so perfectly, or at least, I thought it would. Maya had made reservations at that little Italian place we used to love before everything started to unravel. Candles flickered softly on the table, wine glasses caught the dim light, and for a brief moment, I almost believed we could pretend. She reached across the table, taking my hand gently. Lila, I want us to find our way back. I don't want to lose you. I wanted to believe her so badly. But all the frustration and loneliness I'd been carrying bubbled up like a dam breaking inside me. I squeezed her hand too tight, then pulled away abruptly. No, I whispered, my voice cracking. You don't want me. You want this. I gestured vaguely, the words catching in my throat. You want everything to be about sex. About touch. But I'm not there anymore. Maya blinked, confusion washing over her face. Lila, I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. But it's not enough. I burst out, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. You don't see me. You don't hear me. And I'm tired of pretending that a kiss or a touch will fix what's broken inside. My voice shook, and the candlelight seemed suddenly harsh, unforgiving. Other diners glanced over, but I didn't care. Maya's face hardened for a moment, then softened into something I couldn't quite read, hurt, frustration, maybe a little anger. I don't know what you want from me, she said quietly, pulling her hand back. The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to explain, to tell her that I felt lost, invisible, and so deeply alone, even when she was right there beside me. But the words slipped away, swallowed by the weight of everything unsaid. After dinner, I left the restaurant without saying goodbye. Outside, the night air was cold, and the city buzzed around me, indifferent to my pain. I found myself walking toward Elaine's house again, the one place that didn't demand anything from me but understanding. When she opened the door, I collapsed into her arms, the tears falling harder now. I crossed a line, I whispered against her shoulder. I didn't mean to, but I did. Elaine held me tighter, her voice soft. Sometimes, when we're hurting, we reach for comfort wherever we can find it. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. But the guilt clung to me like a second skin. I thought about Maya, the woman I loved, the woman I was hurting by not being able to give her what she needed. I felt broken, confused, ashamed. How did things get so tangled that the person I trusted most was now the source of my deepest pain? How did a love that once felt safe and thrilling turn into this heavy weight pressing down on my chest? I didn't have answers yet. But I knew one thing for sure, I had crossed a line, and there was no going back, not without facing everything I was afraid to confront. Days slipped by like shadows, each one stretching longer than the last. Maya and I became strangers sharing the same space, our silence louder than any argument. The apartment felt colder, emptier, like the warmth had leaked out slowly, leaving behind only the outlines of what we used to be. I watched her from across the room more times than I care to admit. She'd come home late, shoulders heavy with exhaustion and something else, something I couldn't name but felt in the way she moved, quiet and withdrawn. Sometimes, she'd sit on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the floor, like the weight of everything was pressing her down. She wasn't angry with me. Not really. I could see the sadness behind her eyes, the same kind of ache I felt in my own chest. It made me realize that this wasn't just my pain, it was ours. Two people unraveling, both lost and scared, both aching to be seen but too afraid to reach out. One evening, I tried. I brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, just a small, tender gesture. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. Just stared at me with tired eyes that held 1,000 unspoken words. "I miss you," I said softly. She didn't answer. But later, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Just 3 words, "I miss you too." It was a start, but it also felt like a chasm we weren't sure how to cross. I carried so much guilt with me, guilt for the line I crossed, for the moments I wasn't strong enough to hold us both. I hated the thought of hurting Maya, the woman who had loved me fiercely and quietly for years. And yet, I also felt this deep longing for something more than what we had become. I missed the laughter, the closeness, the unspoken understanding that once made us unstoppable. But how do you rebuild something when both sides are fragile, when every touch and word feels loaded with fear? I thought about walking away more than once. It would be easier, safer. To leave before the silence turned into resentment, before the love we had became something we couldn't recognize anymore. But then I'd catch her looking at me across the room, eyes soft with hope she's too scared to voice. And I'd feel a flicker inside, a stubborn ember that refused to die out. So I made a choice, quiet but clear. I wanted to try. Not because I knew how, but because I couldn't imagine giving up on us without fighting for the pieces that still felt whole. Even if that meant facing the hardest parts of myself, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. For now, that was enough. The morning light spilled softly through the curtains, casting a pale glow across the room. Maya was asleep on the couch, her breath steady but heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I watched her for a long moment, tracing the familiar lines of her face, the curve of her cheek, the soft rise and fall of her chest, and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time, cautious hope. We had talked late into the night, voices low and raw, peeling back the layers we'd been hiding behind for months. No easy answers, no quick fixes. But honesty, at last. "I don't want us to break," she said, eyes shining with quiet vulnerability. "But I know I've made mistakes. I didn't realize how much you needed me to see you, not just touch you." I nodded, the lump in my throat stubborn and real. "I'm scared," I admitted. Scared that maybe the part of us that was so alive is gone. She reached for my hand, fingers entwining with mine in a gesture so small it almost went unnoticed. But it spoke volumes. "We'll have to find it again," she whispered. "Together. If you want to." I wasn't sure if I could promise forever, not yet. But I could promise this, I would try. Because despite everything, I still loved her. And maybe, that was enough for now. Later, when the house was still and quiet, I moved to the couch and sat beside her. I didn't say anything, words felt too fragile. Instead, I leaned in, resting my head gently on her shoulder. She shifted just enough to wrap her arm around me, pulling me close. The hug was silent, steady, and real. No expectations. No pressure. Just 2 people holding on, afraid but willing to face whatever came next. In that moment, I realized something important. Healing isn't about forgetting the past or pretending the cracks don't exist. It's about learning to hold the broken pieces carefully, together. Maybe the line I crossed wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, something scarred but stronger for it. And as I closed my eyes, feeling her steady breath against my skin, I allowed myself to hope. Not for perfection. Not for a fairy tale. But for the messy, beautiful, imperfect love that we could still build, one fragile moment at a time. If you're still listening, thank you. I've carried this story inside me for so long, like a secret shadow I couldn't quite shake. Maybe it's because it's messy, maybe because it's uncomfortable, but mostly because it's real. I'm Lila. 32 years old. A woman who thought she understood love, who thought that knowing someone for 7 years meant safety, meant forever. But love isn't always what we expect. It's complicated. It's fragile. And sometimes, it's a quiet unraveling you don't notice until the threads have slipped too far. I crossed a line with my girlfriend's mom. Those words taste bitter to say out loud. But what that really means is that I was lost. I was desperate for something I couldn't find in the place I thought I should. I was craving emotional intimacy, the kind that seeps beneath the skin and makes you feel seen, truly seen. Not just touched or held, but understood. I learned that physical love, as powerful as it is, can't fill the cracks left by emotional distance. Maya's love was there, I never doubted that. But it was wrapped up in fear, exhaustion, and a language I couldn't speak anymore. She showed me affection through touch, but I needed more: vulnerability, presence, conversation, the courage to admit when things hurt. And I needed to admit that I was scared too. Scared of losing her, but also scared of losing myself. The hardest part was realizing that love isn't enough if it's not rooted in understanding. If we don't meet each other where we are, if we don't listen, not just hear, but really listen, then we drift apart. Not with a bang, but with silence. I don't know what the future holds for Maya and me. Maybe we'll find our way back. Maybe we won't. But I do know this: I found a new kind of strength in acknowledging my own needs and fears. In accepting that relationships aren't perfect, and sometimes the people we love are also the ones we hurt the most. I've learned that crossing a line isn't always about betrayal, it can be about searching. Searching for connection, for warmth, for the kind of love that feels like home. And sometimes, that search takes us places we never expected. To anyone listening who's caught in that same messy space, between love and loneliness, desire and fear, know this: you're not alone. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to want more. It's okay to protect your heart, even if that means stepping back to breathe. But don't forget to lean in, too. To risk the hard conversations. To hold the fragile pieces of yourself and your love with gentle hands. Because love, real love, is messy and complicated and imperfect. And it asks us to be brave every single day. So here I am, messy and imperfect, still learning what it means to love and be loved. And maybe, that's enough. Thank you for hearing me.